Hello my friends and welcome back and happy Tuesday to you. Let the surviving game continue. You survived yesterday, you're gonna survive today, and then we'll go to the end of the week one by one. I promise you that. Today we begin with the Ukrainian war review with Polish air defense. Not from Ukraine, not from Russia, but from Poland, because that country is surprising everybody lately in the last year. They are pumping almost everything they have to the military. I would also, because in the Second World War, Poland lost 25%, 1/4 of their entire population by two of their aggressive neighbors, Soviet Union and the Third Reich. So, of course, with that experience, now they see things going the same way from the east at least. They would pump everything to the military, and I'm glad because that benefits Estonia also. Now, I'll begin with that. I want to talk about Polish air defense, but we'll begin with a very connected topic because about a week ago, actually less than a week ago, Russian missile flew into the Polish airspace for the second time in the entire duration of this war. First time was when it landed in Poland and there were 2 Polish casualties. Now, Russian missile flew into Poland this morning. Polish Operational Command reported that. This morning means a few days ago, actually. The Polish Air Force observed the missile for 39 seconds in the Polish airspace. This 39 is very important. If it was 40, it would be round up to 40. 39 gives an impression that they started following it from the very first second to the very last second that it was in Poland, and they have eyes on the missiles all the time, sending a message to Putin that we know what's going on in our airspace and we can shoot it down any moment if we want to. A cruise missile has been programmed. Putin deliberately let it fly over Poland. These missiles don't fly randomly. They have pre-programmed path, so it was deliberate. And how will NATO react? Yes, it has been condemnation, as always, but that's not it. And this is what I want to talk about now. This analysis comes to us from NAFO guy Joni Askola. His link is in the description below. And Poland reacts to it by buying an insane amount of weapons as usual. I think every video about Poland I make is always the same. Poland is militarizing to oblivion. As discussed earlier, a Russian missile entered Polish airspace once again, so today we will talk about Polish air defense. As we all know, Poland's armed forces have been on a spending spree for the last few years. They're currently spending around 4% of their GDP on defense, and they want to go up to 5%, as does Estonia, by the way. Poland and Estonia, with the GDP percentages, are one of the highest NATO members spending percentages in the NATO alliance at all, period. And I'm glad about it. I'm proud about my country's decision on that. Poland will be a military powerhouse. They're buying insane amounts of HIMARS launchers, tanks, self-propelled artillery and so on. But how is the state of their air defense? Poland's air defense is mostly composed of modernized old Soviet systems. They still rely heavily on the S-125, which makes their air defense one of the fields where they still need to improve, but they know it. They are currently developing an impressive 3-layer air defense umbrella based on the Polish short-range systems, American Patriot medium-range systems, and British CAM systems for the gap in between. Poland does not really need long-range air defense because they have Air Force for that. All these systems will be integrated under the Integrated Battle Command System, and some of the systems have already arrived. So Poland is also expanding their air defense capabilities, which, when you're fighting Russia, is one of the most important areas, because as good as your air defense is, the less of your country will be destroyed, because Russia usually uses missiles and drones. So you can shoot them down, you can keep your factories intact. As simple as that. This Polish decision to expand on their air defense is obviously good for NATO and Europe, because Poland's geographic location is really important, and Poland will soon have one of the strongest air defenses in Europe. It will be interesting to see if they start responding to Russia's provocations by shooting down missiles that enter their airspace. Now, this was the second time a Russian missile entered. I would love to see Poland start shooting them down. As soon as they enter, boom, karabim, shoot it down, send a message to the world and to Russia that Poland is a sovereign nation that is ready to act aggressively, defending their airspace and their borders. That's what I want to see. Also in Estonia. Now, we're not yet done with Poland. If you thought this is only a report about Ukrainian war, no, I love Poland and I want to bring them into the videos more, because Poland has announced recently that in view of Russian attempt to destabilize the region of Europe and invade Ukraine, the target size of its army will be almost 500,000 available personnel. The active reserve is to amount to 150,000 soldiers, which, together with soldiers of the types of service, would give up to 450,000 soldiers into the Polish armed forces. Now that is a force, a NATO force to be reckoned with. If we talk about Russia, 500,000 men, million men, well, these are meat. It's a Russian meat tactic. When we talk about Poland, all of these men will receive training and weaponry and modernized, they will be used according to modernized NATO doctrine. Now that is not even equal to 1 million Russian men. It's equal to 5 million Russian men, because look at Winter War. Stalin used all of his meat as the Russians do always in suicide banzai attacks. One Finnish soldier, on average, killed 10 Russian soldiers by the end of the Winter War and Continuation War, which is 1 to 10th. And Finland was a very poorly equipped nation back then. The military was very poorly equipped. Poland is different. They are very well equipped. So this is very terrifying for Russia. Work has already begun on implementing a new model for training and maintaining readiness of reserves, which would ultimately allow to achieve such a number of active reserve. Way to go, Poland. I don't know how it's thank you in Poland. Is it duck? I think it's duck. So thank you, Polish. My friends, now we travel back to 1998, 1 year before Putin assumes the president status in Russia, 1 year before. What was he back then? What was his style back then? Has anything changed? Well, no, my friends, I'll read you a report and it's eerie. In 1998, the editor of the newspaper Pravny Petersburg, Anatoly Levin Utkin, wrote an article in which he stated that Vladimir Putin had no right to head the FSB, that he was not a general but a lieutenant colonel. A week after the material was published, Levin Utkin was brutally murdered before entering his home. How many years have passed, and today we observe the same methods but used on mass scale. He had this style back then, he has this style now. Nothing has changed. If any Western leader is surprised, then it's only because they don't know their history. Because if you know Russian history, then this is just their playbook. This is just how they do things. Now, my friends, we'll go to year 1995 and I'll bring you Dudayev, the future president, or at the time president of Czechia. Ukraine will eventually confront Russia on irreconcilable conditions. As long as Russianism exists, it will never refuse from its ambitions. They want to hide it under the Slav excuse, like they did before. Take Ukraine, Belarus. Belarus is taken already because they're a puppet of Russia, and Ukraine they're trying to take now. Be strengthened up, and then nobody wants to be in the military alliance with Russia now. Not just military, but also in economical, political, and even trade relations. He said this 20 years ago, and it's true now. Because they've been well studied. The same as world was fighting fascism, it's fighting against Russianism now. And this fight will be escalating. And it's pointless for Russians to think that they can scare the world with their army, criminals, and nuclear weapons. It's exactly the same. It's eerie how he did that 25 years ago. Well, because Russia, the history goes in circles. It was true then, now the circle is complete again. It's true again, and it will be complete again in 20 years or 50 years if we don't destroy Russia. No, they will not. Everyone has already been scared. Everyone already went through that Russianism hell, and Russia will be put back in line of human civilization. Either it will stop existing as a country, or they must get in line of the world community. Russians are naked in front of the world right now. They're not just extremely naked, they are turned inside out. to their guts. The whole world has seen who are the Russians and Russism and how dangerous it is for humanity. They are killing civilians. They don't have any protection. Completely unprotected civilians. They're killing from inaccessible distance from air and artillery. I'd say too much in this video, but 25 years ago, exactly what is going on now. So you don't need to be a wizard or seeing the future. You just need to know your history and need to know the Russian aggression playbook, because they follow a very certain doctrine. Then you can just predict what will happen 50 years from now. Dudayev's words will be true 100 years from now if Russia is not put in line or destroyed. Wiping everything out of existence. Then they come to that city or place and start up until dirty lingers. Russism is scarier there than fascism, Nazism, or racism. Scarier than all misanthropic ideologies. The only nation in the world that believes in nothing. That is the spiritless, immoral. So story with Dudayev is also personally connected to my family lineage, because in 1995, when Dudayev was president, before in 1990 and 1989, when Russian forces came to Estonia, because Estonia wanted to be free, and Russian tank army actually rode into Estonia to push back the democratic movement of people on the street, and they wanted to take the TV tower. That's what happened in Lithuania, in Vilnius actually. Same thing, Russian tanks came in, people formed a human chain to defend the TV tower, because the TV tower was their only connection to the outside world and not the Soviet media space. They wanted to remain that connection with Sweden and Finland and West Germany. So they protected that TV tower. What the tanks did, they rode over people. They did, just rode over civilians. 14 people died. Same thing later was going to happen in Estonia a few months later. The tanks were ready, their barrels pointed at the civilians, and back then, my grandfather was already in the committee who ruled Soviet Estonia. He was a politician, and he was a very close friend with Dudayev, actually. The General Dudayev, who was not president of Chechnya, because he was a general of that very same army unit and those tanks who came to Estonia. He represented Chechnya in the Soviet Union, also a repressed nation, Muslim nation in the Soviet Union. So he understood the Baltic struggle and Estonian struggle as one small nation to another under the Soviet hegemon. So what my grandfather did, he met with Dudayev, he talked to Dudayev, they were friends for a long time, and Dudayev gave an order not to hurt people. The tanks were there, the troops were there, but nothing happened. And in the end, they pulled back. They did not ride over people, because Dudayev was the leader of that military unit, and in Lithuania there was a different leader who didn't care. He had a Russian background, he was an ideology of Russism, as Dudayev said. He rode over the people immediately. Dudayev didn't do that, so we didn't have any Estonian casualties on the defense of the TV tower. It's also connected to my family lineage. Now, my friends, a topic: why does the United States prefer a slow-boiling Russia, like the slow-boiling frog which doesn't jump out of the hot water? Why is it like that? Because everything we have seen from the United States, they're holding back weapon supplies, they're holding back support. It feels like almost that they don't want Ukraine to win too fast, because Russia is crumbling, they're slowly dying, they don't know it yet, they're boiling slowly. The United States would end it like that, but they don't do it. Why? It's kept more or less unexposed. Someone understood that Russia has a self-annihilating system of multi-level lying that they're addicted to. Even if someone saw the light, they just cannot stop themselves. It means that everyone at every level lies to hide failures. That is the Russian way. That is the Russian mindset, Russism. It is about lying everything. There's no reality. The reality is what the propaganda says, and the propaganda says this, that, and the third thing. There is no truth in Russism. Publicly, they all live in denial. By the time the top echelons find out that reality might not be what they thought, they have to lie about it too, or it will weaken them both internally and publicly. That makes them addicted. No information can be trusted. And that will make it into a boiled frog situation, although in reality it doesn't exist, because frogs will escape when the water gets too warm, so it's a myth. But in Russian sense, It's a reality. Those who expose the lies are removed. Prigozhin exposed it and was removed. Surovikin protested it, not even publicly, and was removed. That's addiction to lies. The Russian army and leadership is convinced that lies give them advantages, confuse their opponents and prevent them from losing. In reality, that's their slow undoing. There's one necessary condition though. And here is where it gets very interesting. It's psychology, it's everything. It's the changing of systems. If you change them too fast, you will get a Soviet revolution that killed 10 million people. If you change them slowly, it will not go there. And this is what the Western approach has been, very slowly escalating, step by step, so the frog wouldn't jump out. The losses and the defeats must not exceed the maximum size of deniability. That's an essential precondition. Everyone in the chain of command must be able to lie about it. And if the losses become immeasurably big, you cannot lie about them. So the West also, I'm not saying that I am for or against this method, but this is the method the West, collective West, has chosen. The losses have to be in line with the slow boiling of the frog. Russian self-annihilation can be kept going as long as you maintain a crumbling pace. That's it. And that's what the West is doing. If they would give weapons that are too effective, then Ukraine would win immediately, and that would result in Russian people consolidating with Putin, behind Putin's back, against the West. But if they suffer slowly, lose slowly, the West is escalating very slowly, almost not doing anything, almost being weak, then the Russian people can only blame their leadership. My friends, in the past week, Russia has seriously increased their bombardment of Ukraine. They have shot out 190 types of missiles, 140 Shahed drones, and 700 guided aerial bombs. This 700 here is very important because it is proven to be one of the most effective Russian means of destruction. They love destroying everything, cities and trench lines, everything. The most effective way to do so is with huge amount of explosives. Now drones are a smart weapon, missiles are a very smart and expensive weapon, but bombs, glide bombs, you just slap a huge amount of explosives into a metal shell, you attached a semi-smart guidance kit to it, which is semi-cheap, and Russia can mass produce them, and then you can bombard Ukraine day and night with huge amounts of explosives, which unfortunately, Russia can produce themselves internally. That's what they're doing. It's according to their doctrine, destroy everything and mass produce the weapon. So they're using glide bombs and you cannot shoot them down. The only way you can stop these glide bombs is the F-16, which could push back the Russian bombers, which have to release the glide bomb about 10 kilometers from the target. The F-16s could actually shoot them down. That's the answer, and that's the only answer. Now, my friends, we'll talk about, again, the slow boiling of the frog, which is exactly sanctions. Sanctions are the water, the pot, going up 1 degree at the time, slowly. And in the end, you get hot tea and the frog dies. But if you immediately put your hand into the boiling water, throw a frog in, it will jump out and scream, and the people of Russia would rise up and hate the West for the rest of their lives, which is not the case right now, at least not yet. So this is why sanctions are a very effective weapon, and I do stand behind them. I don't think they're a weak reaction. I think there needs to be a military reaction, but sanctions must remain in place. They are the true weapon, the most terrifying invisible weapon. Sanctions are starting to impede Russia's oil exports. The Russian oil export industry, crucial for financing the Kremlin's activities in Ukraine, faces obstacles as Indian oil refiners refuse tankers owned by state-run Subcomflot due to sanctions. Many people who are pro-Russia in the West are saying that, oh, these sanctions just decouple the West and Russia with oil and gas exports, and now they sell to China and India, but that's not the case. India also is afraid of the sanctions. So is China, because both of these countries need money, and a lot of that money comes from the West, actually, majority of it. So if sanctions touch them, they lose a lot of money. So it's in their interest not to buy Russian oil. And now we have first reports that India is actually refusing to buy Russian oil. Since October, the United States has expanded sanctions to tankers carrying Russian crude oil. As a result, numerous tankers have been inactive, leading to a rise in idle Russian diesel barrels in the oceans. That means that Russian diesel and oil is just on the tankers, which nobody wants to buy, just on the tankers. It cannot be put back to ground because there's nowhere to hold it. It cannot be sold, so it's just standing there, waiting for somebody to want it. The highest since 2017, actually. Right now, idle tankers is the highest. The targeting of Sovcom floats represents a significant tightening of United States sanctions against Russia. Since October, the United States sanctioned 40 Russian oil tankers. According to Bloomberg's tankers tracking data, none of these sanctioned ships have loaded cargo since being named by the United States Treasury. These developments could gradually squeeze Russian petroleum revenues, aligning with the United States and allied efforts to thwart President Putin's military aggression. Now, people might think sanctions as a weakness, as a weak response. If it's only sanctions, then yes, it is a weak response. But if it is sanctions plus getting ready for war, buying weapons, a military muscle showing like Poland is doing and Estonia, then it's an extremely strong response. Having a strong army plus forcing sanctions on Russia, that's the way to go. And that's slowly the way West is going. Now, my friends, we'll talk a little bit about another, boring topic, which is not explosions and weapons, but the pace of this war that Russia is currently running. When you run a marathon, then the one who runs with a steady pace and keep going at till the end will possibly win over the one that really forces himself and then pukes because he ran too fast and cannot finish. Russia right now is sprinting, full pace. Every factory is working. All of the money is going to the military. That's not to win the marathon. And this is a marathon of a war. It is not a fast war. Everything points to that. While it may appear to some right now that Russia has unlimited military power, it is simply not the case. Their Soviet stores of key heavy weapons, tanks, armored infantry vehicles and howitzers will all be completely depleted in 1.5 to 2.5 years from now. Their domestic production of these systems is not even 10% of their battlefield loss rates. I haven't seen any evidence that they're producing howitzers whatsoever, and that's what they'll almost certainly run out first in just 1.5 to 2 years. That means that all of the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, BTRs and T-72s, which is mostly used, they come from warehouses. What they do is they take the old Soviet tank, they modernize a little bit, they tweak it up, and they send it to the front as a metal meat. They are not producing them from zero. They're taking the old warehouses because they can produce from zero only 10% of what they lose. So as soon as these warehouses are empty, and they will be at this rate very fast, they're screwed. They cannot produce enough. Unless they buy from China or North Korea, they don't have anything to send, and their main doctrine, meat assaults, cannot continue. Despite a seemingly growing economy, the growth is all driven by military spending, and the economy will almost certainly collapse if the spending stops. GDP growth of 4.6 between January 2023 and January 2024 was mostly a recovery. It had contracted minus 2.7% that year prior. Inflation has been above 7% for months and has been increasing slowly but steadily. The central bank interest rate is at 16% and won't be coming down anytime soon. So for the last 2 years almost, the interest rate in Russia has been 16%. If you are in economy, I don't have much knowledge about this, but I know that 16% interest is as tight as you can get, meaning your country cannot grow. Money is so expensive and you need money to grow, to invest. There's no investment in Russia. Money is extremely expensive. Cannot take any loans on that money, or if you will probably not grow. So if you know anything about economy, please put it down below why this 16% is so bad for Russia. But as with my limited understanding, this is horrible for Russia. There is a persistent labor shortage, driving up demand for workers, driving up wages, which ultimately drives up inflation further. Successful Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil refineries and distribution centers has cut output by 11% in the recent months, and ongoing strikes will severely interfere with the Kremlin's main source of revenue. Russia has lost 47,000 men in October to march to Decaying, a city with pre-war population of 35,000. They advanced the front line 14 kilometers with a price of 47,000 men. In the process, but have over 50 kilometers to reach the Donetsk Oblast border, By their 2-year rate of progress, they'll need another 7 years to reach the closest border edge of an oblast they claim to have already annexed. So this shows that they are insanely behind in their war schedule and goals, and they're spurting. Imagine you're sprinting as fast as you can in the marathon, but you're still insanely behind on the goals, the time goals you set on yourself. That's what they're doing right now, exhausting themselves. And now, my friends, my favorite part of the video, of course, butchering the Buy Me a Coffee members. If you become a member, that's monthly member, I will butcher your name in the most unintelligible way possible. Let's go. Brian Ruhlman, Melv Morris, Prasklav Yks, David Shimek. We have another Melv Morris. Melv? Double Melvs? Well, thank you. Paul Hare, William Larue, Tommi Nätkiniemi, Suomi mainitu, torilla tavataan. Every time I have to say this when a Finnish person is in the house. Glenn Hokkut, Kole Anthony Kimeris Sutton. Thank you to these 10 members. Again, if you like the channel and wish to support it, Buy Me a Coffee members, best way to do that. Links in the description below. Until my next video, my friends, which is tomorrow, press the subscribe, press the bell button to be notified about my videos. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.